This is work in collaboration with Professor Jeff Meeks, and we are essentially looking at accounting and corporate governance aspects around mergers and acquisitions. And in particular, we look at the whole range from what happens before a takeover, what happens during a takeover, and what happens afterwards. So, for example, in work that Professor Meeks has done with his PhD students before takeovers, looking into how firms manage, how acquiring firms manage their earnings to essentially paint a better picture of their performance, hence influence their market values, the share prices increase, and then use these shares to acquire other companies. So essentially inflate their currency to acquire other companies for a better price. So we also look into what happens during the merger process. So this is ongoing research, and there we look into what kind of information managers give to the shareholders. So in particular to acquiring and to the target shareholders. So in what way, what kind of picture do they paint what the acquisition will have as an impact on earnings, for example, and who should be the leading management team for the combined firm. So to set the reference to corporate governance effects of acquisitions. One example is during this merger process, managers have a discretion to essentially inform shareholders about certain information, right? During the merger process. Some of it is voluntary, that they can give out this information voluntarily. Some is required by accounting regulations. So we look into what kind of voluntary information they provide. So in this case, what kind of forecasts do the acquiring firms' managers provide to the shareholders of what the prospects of the merger is going to be? And as you can imagine, these forecasts are, for example, forecasts of earnings are very rosy. So there's, of course, talk of synergies and of increases in earnings per share. And the question is why do managers provide these forecasts if they are voluntary and they can be held accountable afterwards? So there is some indication in the evidence we see that these forecasts are provided to convince shareholders of the benefits of the deal, to get the deals done, because these deals have come with large private benefits for the managers, and as we see ex post, usually don't live up to the expectations managers give. What we also find is that after the mergers, there is a higher likelihood of shareholder lawsuits for those managers that provided these too optimistic forecasts during the merger process. But now the problem is that the evidence of whether or not shareholders were misinformed, so this is what they claim, lies with the plaintiffs. So they have to provide the evidence that they were in fact misinformed or misled by managers. And this is very difficult to prove, because the managers, of course, can say, well, at that point in time, at the merger, it seemed that synergies would come through and that these acquisitions would be beneficial. To some extent, I was surprised that the market, so shareholders don't learn from this. So if you think of it, we know that in most of the cases, mergers do not live up to the expectations. So they don't. There's no synergy gains. There's usually no performance increases, and usually the shareholders suffer. So now they seem to believe what managers tell them at that point in time of the mergers. But now we don't see only one acquisition. There's like hundreds, thousands of acquisitions year by year happening. And at some point, I was surprised to see that even in recent years, we still see these effects. So there's no learning by the market. They seem to be fooled by these expectations. Either we see that at some point, with more sophisticated information systems and more information flowing to shareholders in general, we will see that they can make better decisions and hence maybe have other information sources that they can use to essentially benchmark the information they're given from the managers. Or we will see that that standard setters, regulators will require certain sets of information from managers, so that we have, and these have to be issued within certain frameworks, so that we don't see this discretion in providing too optimistic forecasts. As we see at the moment, we have this convergence of accounting standards into one international set of standards. So this is a good way to maintain comparability across countries, across firms. And within that set, managers have discretion to some extent. So, and this discretion, I think, needs to be maintained, but also needs to be supervised to some extent, because as we found in our research, where there is no set of standards, so for example, where there's essentially free disclosure policies for managers to, for example, disclose forecasts, and these are too optimistic, maybe we need a set of standards to say, well, if they provide this information to the market, it should be in a standardized form and in a way that they can be held accountable for it ex post.